Something just happened that hasn't happened since World War II. A U.S. submarine has sunk an enemy warship. Yeah, you heard that right. In the pre-dawn hours of March 4th, 2026, a single torpedo, fired from deep in the Indian Ocean, didn't just sink a frigate, it sent a massive shockwave through the world of naval warfare.
But think about that for a second. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? A hunter you can't see, using a weapon that gives you absolutely no warning. So how is that even possible? We're going to break down the tech, the strategy, and the incredible high-stakes game that's playing out right now, deep beneath the waves. All right, so let's set the scene. Our story starts just before dawn, off the coast of Sri Lanka. The target is an Iranian frigate, the IRIS Dena. Now she's heading home after a naval exercise, sailing along completely, totally unaware that she's being stalked from below.
And the timeline of what happens next is just brutally fast. At 5 a.m., bam! Impact. Just 8 minutes later, a desperate distress call goes out. But by the time rescue crews even get to the coordinates an hour later, the warship is gone. Vanished. It took just 48 minutes from strike to sinking.
The physics of this attack are just mind-blowing. See, the torpedo doesn't just punch a hole in the ship. It actually detonates underneath it. This creates this enormous gas bubble that physically lifts the entire vessel out of the water, breaking its back. It snaps the keel in half. Pentagon footage showed the Dena's stern just being completely vaporized.
And the human cost was staggering. Out of about 180 sailors on board, only 32 were ever rescued. Over 80 lives were lost in the dark waters of the Indian Ocean. It's a really stark reminder of just how lethal modern naval combat can be. So, the big question is, how did the U.S. submarine pull off such a perfect, stealthy attack? Well, it really comes down to two key pieces of incredible technology: super advanced sonar and one of the deadliest torpedoes ever built. Okay, let's think of it this way. Active sonar is like shouting in a dark room and waiting for the echo to find someone. Sure, you'll find them, but they'll know exactly where you are. Passive sonar, on the other hand, is all about just listening for their footsteps. The Virginia-class sub uses these advanced passive arrays all along its hull to paint a complete picture of the battlefield without making a single sound.
And the torpedo itself, this thing is brilliant. It's not just a fire-and-forget weapon. First, it's pushed out silently with pressurized air. Then, the sub's crew actually guides it with a super thin wire. As it gets close, the wire is cut, and the torpedo goes fully autonomous, using its own sonar to hunt. And get this, if it misses, it literally turns around and starts hunting for the target all over again.
I mean, just let that number sink in for a moment. 1,200 pounds of TNT. That's an almost unimaginable amount of destructive force packed into a single weapon. And it really explains the catastrophic damage that we saw happen to the IRIS Dena.
But look, this strike didn't happen in a vacuum. It's actually one move in a much larger and much more dangerous strategic chess game playing out across the entire Indian Ocean. You see, the U.S. is hunting Iranian vessels for a very, very specific reason.
And the answer, it turns out, is a tiny, remote island called Diego Garcia. This place is one of America's most vital military bases. It's like a fortress, home to nuclear-capable B-2 stealth bombers, the very tip of America's long-range spear. And Iran? They see it as a primary target. Now, Iran knows it can't go toe-to-toe with the U.S. Navy. It's just not a fair fight. So, they don't fight fair. They use what are called asymmetric tactics. They disguise missile launchers on what look like ordinary cargo ships, they develop long-range missiles designed to get around defenses, and they use proxy forces, like the Houthis, to create diversions and stretch American forces thin.
So it all comes down to this. Iran's entire strategy is about landing a crippling first blow on Diego Garcia. They believe that if they can disable that airbase, destroy those B-2 bombers on the ground, they can essentially neutralize America's ability to project power across the entire region.
And to pull off this kind of plan, Iran has developed a really unique and, well, unconventional navy. These aren't your typical warships. They're designed specifically for surprise, for deception, and for these asymmetric attacks. First up, you've got this thing, the Shahid Mahdavi. To you or me, it just looks like a 240-meter-long cargo vessel. But it's actually been completely re-engineered into an amphibious assault ship. It carries drones, attack boats, and its deadliest secret, long-range ballistic missiles hidden inside what look just like standard shipping containers. Then there's this beast, the Soleimani class. This is a super high-speed catamaran, and it is armed to the teeth with cruise missiles, a vertical launch system, and even its own helicopter and drones.
But its lightweight aluminum hull is a bit of a double-edged sword. When it gets hit, it doesn't just fracture, it actually burns.
And you gotta understand this recent sinking is not an isolated incident. The US and Iran have a long and frankly violent history of naval clashes, especially back in the 1980s. The technology changes, but the core conflict, well, that remains the same.
I mean, this rivalry goes way back. In 1988, during this massive naval battle, a small Iranian attack craft called the Jashan fired a harpoon missile at a US cruiser. The cruiser dodged it and then fired back its own missile, sinking the Jashan in what a lot of historians call the first ever missile duel between two warships.
On that very same day, the Iranian frigate Sahand decided to steam out and challenge the US fleet. It was a fatal mistake. The ship was just swarmed by American jets and warships. It was hit with so many bombs and missiles that its own ammunition magazines eventually just cooked off in a massive secondary explosion that sank the ship from the inside out. But maybe the craziest story of all is what happened to another frigate, the Sabalan. After it fired on US aircraft, an A-6 intruder pilot dodged the attack, looped around, and dropped a single 500-pound laser-guided bomb. And with surgical precision, that bomb went directly down the ship's smokestack, exploding in the engine room and crippling it instantly. So, after all this, the history, the tech, the strategy, what is it all really about? Why all this conflict? Well, past, present, and future, it all comes back to this: the Strait of Hormuz. It is, without a doubt, the world's single most important choke point for oil. And controlling it, or even just being able to threaten it, gives a nation incredible leverage over the entire global economy.
And that leaves us with a really big and pretty critical question, doesn't it? We've seen how one invisible submarine can literally erase a modern warship in minutes. So as these undersea technologies become even more lethal, even more stealthy, are these tense, isolated encounters in the middle of the ocean becoming the true front line of 21st century conflict?